So this morning, we want to welcome Kimberly and Jim Carson. Yeah, let's have a big hand. You can't see them out there in cyberspace yet, but you'll see them in a minute. They're down here as our guest speakers for part 2 of a 3-part series on Kashmir Shaivism. And the first part 1, Jim guided us through back in November 5th. And it's on our website, recorded on our website, so you can see that, catch up with that. And also in that, I gave a little introduction explaining their connection to the center. So I'm not going to go through that again. You'll see that on the website as well if you look up the recording. But I will say very briefly this, that back in 2002, somebody gave them a copy of my book, Naked Through the Gate. They read it. They were interested. We got in touch. They were living in North Carolina at the time, so they couldn't come on Sundays or anything, but they started coming on retreats, our spring and fall retreats, and were very active in participating. In fact, Kimberly did led some yoga there, I think. So anyway, then in 2007, they moved to Oregon, and they ended up in Portland at the Oregon Health and Science University. I got that right? Where they've been ever since. And they're developing programs that integrate mindfulness, meditation, and yoga with modern medical therapies and so forth. So very active in that field. And they also have their own organization, Mindful Yoga Works. And this is more directly spiritual, and they do trainings and teachings and so forth from there. And, you know, honestly, I was going to give you a little kind of sketch of each of them. Mm-hmm. And they got so much going. I mean, they co-author books, they do these trainings, they this and that, and they've got a wonderful website. So I'm just going to direct you to their website. And that's mindfulyogaworks.com altogether. I think it's in the chat box or something, so you can check that out. So please do look that up, and you'll find this really interesting. They're a very interesting couple. I mean, I every time I read that, I think, gee, God, they've really been through a lot. So anyway, they're here for, and on top of all that, I got to say, they raised 2 teenagers. So in the midst of all this, so we're really lucky to have them make time for them, come down and talk to us. So we're here for part 2, which is non-dual devotion. And this part 3 is going to be on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. It's an easy date to remember. So without further ado, let me turn it over to you guys.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Good morning, Joel. It is so nice to be here. Just first want to extend just infinite gratitude to Joel and to the center. It moves me to tears. The grace that has moved through your teachings has been so central to my unfolding and to my discovery of truth. So thank you very much. It's a high honor to sit here beside you. So it's really nice to have everyone here. It's nice to see people whose faces I recognize. It's nice to see people whose faces I don't recognize. And, you know, as we go through this material together today, both from an intellectual understanding as well as an experiential understanding, first, I would just like to invite the possibility that we are only existing together as consciousness in consciousness, that we are already one, that there is no separation here. And just that remembrance in each moment really is the practice of non-dual devotion, the practice of non-dual devotion. And as we go through this material, I'd also just like to reiterate for those of us who forget in our rational understandings of things, is that the nature of reality is so immense and so mysterious that anything we might encounter in any given moment might really just be a simple mind blow. And so just inviting that possibility of relaxing into the mystery because we probably will be sharing some processes that are rather mysterious. Okay, so we just want to honor that at the beginning. And we also just want to honor that the remembrance that every single journey into the discovery of what this is that we are all experiencing and sharing together is completely unique. So anything that we speak to and share from our own personal discovery of non-dual devotion is in no way is some like thing that has to be experienced by anybody else, right? That this is just our humble offering of what this process has been like for us. Okay.
Good. So first we want to start with just a brief recap from the first talk that we gave, which the title of was Tantric Intimacy with the Play of Consciousness. The consciousness, Kimberly invited us into recognition of that in this moment, that through consciousness we are all connected right now. And also this mysterious play that's happening all the time and that can be mind-blowing. So we invite you to entertain the possibility that some of the things that we're going to convey are, possible for any of us, although we're going to primarily draw on our own personal experiences of being in a particular current or river of teachings that what are described as Kashmir Shaivism, and in a broader sense, a prominent example of the Tantric tradition. So to recap a little bit, Kashmir Shaivism flourished especially in the region of Kashmir between 850 and 1100 AD. The essence of the Kashmir Shaivism perspective is that consciousness. So there was the reference in the introduction of a single underlying reality. So in this tradition, that single underlying reality is termed Shiva-Shakti. So there's a polarity here, but it's a single reality. So Shiva actually means underlying. So this single underlying reality. So this describes the underlying nature of consciousness, that it is that which within which everything happens and is, that sort of the non-manifest, that which is not visible, that which cannot be touched, that can not be described, and yet is intimate with each of us.
So Tom, would you put the next slide up, please? So here's an image of one representation of Shiva-Shakti. So there is this underlying continuity. I've heard Joel reference it in the past as the hidden continuity of this awareness, right? This presence that's here connecting all of us, right? Is this one unifying process. And then the Shakti is the manifesting force, right? So the Shiva is the underlying unchanging stability, right, of reality. And then the Shakti is the energy that creates everything, right? It's the aliveness of manifestation, right? So it actually is every thought. It is every feeling. It is every sensation. It is every tree. It is every smell. It is every sound. The Shakti is all of the dynamic manifesting energies that are emerging out of and as consciousness. Okay, so this is just the nomenclature that gets used in Kashmir Shaivism, Shiva-Shakti. And so Shimaraj, one of the great initial proponents or authors of Kashmir Shaivite understanding, described the Shakti manifesting process as spanda. And I love this word. It has the same root as spontaneous, right? So the spanda is the spontaneous emanating creation that is being born in every single moment, right? It is the throb of creation, right? So that is the spanda, that is the Shakti. And so it is being manifest every single moment, born into reality every single moment. So this understanding then invites us to recognize this underlying continuity and the ever-changing dynamic manifestation, the throb of creation.
And these are the words of Shimmerai describing Spanda. The essence of Spanda consists in quivering light, which holds in its bosom endless cycles of creation and dissolution. She is the waves in the ocean of consciousness, the willpower of the Supreme. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And this amazing energy is very often in this tradition is a feminine term for consciousness is used, chitti. Chitti means consciousness, but it's exclusively a feminine term. And also this energy then is adored and worshipped in this tradition as not something separate or different, but our own very energy, the energy that is everywhere, including right here. So this is the particular form, the Paradevi, the supreme goddess form that was venerated in Kashmir for, and continues to be, but especially during those ancient times.
Mm. So Jim described the invitation to adore everything that is here, but everything is here is also an adornment, right? So everything that we experience is an adornment of reality, right? So in fact, the root word of adornment of cosmos in Greek is adornment, right? So all of this is an adornment of Shiva-Shakti, right? So then we not only adore it, but we recognize it is the adornment. We are the adornment. All of this is the adornment. And so this is all just condensed vibrations of the one energy, right? Just like water can express as water, as ice, as steam. These are just different densities of the vibratory experience, okay? And so we begin to explore recognizing and seeing this clearly as these expressions of this goddess consciousness. So if you go to the next slide, Tom, thank you so much. And this is an alive slide. If you don't mind hitting the go button, that would be fantastic. So Garab Dorje, the founder of Jojin, put it this way. He said, "You are and always have been Vajrasattva, the infinite consciousness, this living presence and creative power of the divine. Love being our essence, attainment is already complete. Phenomena are not other than the true condition. Earth, air, fire, and water are the indwelling divine. Not 2-1. Not 2-1. Okay. So the practice then is this strong emphasis on relationship, right? The quality of relationship with what we're encountering, with what is here. Right? So that is the focus of practice, to discover one's true nature, this true nature as Shiva-Shakti. Okay. And as Jimbo named in the last talk, the emphasis is not on neti, not this, not this, not this. The emphasis on iti, this, and this, and this, and this. Okay. So it's a radically inclusive view. A radically inclusive view, which in my humble opinion is probably needed a little more than, than at other times in our historical moment. So being able to attune to this constant communication, right? That we're being reminded in each moment that this is divinity birthing itself. Like, so this is the invitation to practice this and this and this and this in every single moment, okay? So that means that every interaction and encounter, whether it's pleasant or difficult, so this is one of those moments where it can be like, this sounds like a bliss bunny path, and wouldn't that be great if life was so easy? But it's everything that arises. Every pain, every sorrow, every fear, every delight, every ecstasy, every befuddlement, without exception. This and this and this. Can you get a feeling of that? Yeah, okay. So this is really where the non-dual devotion arises. Because when the view becomes more and more clear that that's what this is, then everything, everyone, every experience begins to have this invitation into recognition. Into seeing clearly. So I love this process. I like to call it popcorning. And popcorning is I'm going to just ask a question, and I'd love a handful of you or so to give a brief response. So as we dive more deeply now into non-dual devotion, I'd just love to hear some examples of what it is you are naturally devoted to. What are you naturally devoted to?
Sound.
Sound. Okay.
Connection.
Connection.
Nature.
Nature.
Eating.
Reading, eating. Perfect. What else?
My son.
Your son. Anything else you're naturally devoted to?
Jennifer.
Jennifer. Oh, yeah. Our beloveds.
Sunshine.
Sunshine. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we begin to recognize that we have this instinctive devotion, and that these processes of where our instinctive devotion arises naturally begins to be this really powerful pointer. So why is it we're devoted to these things? What is it that calls forward devotion in these relationships? Well, it's when we begin to relax out of the idea that we're separate. We begin to have deeper receptivity that, oh no, you and I, we're in this together, right? The music, the trees, the people we love, the eating, the sound, whatever it is. Okay. So one of the, and we begin to recognize that these processes of devotion are so powerful instinctively, but we all, in our day and time, we overlook them, right? Or we love them when they're here, but we don't really recognize that this is the invitation home, right? This is the invitation home. So we have these experiences where these processes become more and more clear, right? We all have these moments of recognition that there's not two here, there's one, right? And one of the metaphors that I love is how they'll dip a cloth in the olden days. Now I'm sure they do it very differently, but they would dip cloth into a vat of dye. And every time you dip it into that dye, it takes on more and more of the color until it becomes certain, right? That expression becomes certain. So in our process, our spiritual path in Kashmir Shaivism and in this non-dual devotion, we get these little dippings. We see it, we see it, we see it until there is no longer any doubt. So one of the experiences I wanted to share that was one of these dipping into the vats of dye, if you will. I was at HSU up on the hill, and I was walking to the School of Nursing between classes or something, whatever it was. And it was in the fall. And it was one of those days where the color of the trees is so brilliant, it almost hurts. Do you know that color? Right? When you look at it, you're like, oh, really, is this really happening? So exquisite. And in that moment, there was I was adoring the manifestation, right? But then no longer was I adoring the tree. The tree was adoring me. And then I completely disappeared. Any sense of I disappeared. And it was just the tree in its exquisite beauty. It completely collapsed in the love of the thing, right? So just one of those momentary dippings.
So we're going to share a beautiful portion of a beautiful poem from Yaneshwar, one of the great poet saints of India, who wrote a poem about Shiva-Shakti, about this single reality that's so dynamic. Whether you are the seer or seen, it doesn't matter. There is only the one self vibrating everywhere.
From the standpoint of vibration, there is nothing but vibration. So even though you see, do you really see?
It is not that the appearance is arrayed here and the seer is over there. It is only your own vibration that you perceive when you see.
Just as the nose might become a fragrance, or ears might give out a melody for their own enjoyment. or the eyes might produce a mirror in order to see themselves.
Or just as the cheeks might become a soft breeze, or a head might take the form of a fragrant blossom in order to produce a sweet scent.
Or a tongue might become sweetness. A lotus bud might blossom as the sun, or a nightingale might become the moon.
Or flowers might take the form of a bee. A lovely girl might become a young man, or a sleepy man might become a bed on which to lie.
Or as a slab of gold might become articles of jewelry for the sake of beauty.
Just so, the one pure consciousness becomes the enjoyer and the object of enjoyment, the seer and the object of vision, without disturbing its unity.
There is really no action or inaction. Everything that is happening is the sport of the self, Shiva-Shakti.
The undivided one enters the courtyard of duality of its own accord. Unity only becomes strengthened by the expansion of diversity.
Right, so we're going to have a little practice with Adharna, and a little sutra here, and really playing off this invitation of experiencing when the tongue becomes sweetness. When the tongue becomes sweetness. Okay. Now, as we go through this little exploration, what I'd like you to notice is when the subtlety of comparing or distinguishing mind becomes active and wants to create a distinctive barrier between the experience and the experiencer, the honey and the taste of honey. Right, so you're going to see if you pay close enough attention, you'll recognize when that distinguishing structure of mind activates. Don't need to judge it. It's really helpful at times. But as we go through this experiential component, I'd like you just to see if you can watch as the tongue becomes the sweetness. Okay, watch as the tongue becomes the sweetness. So you can go ahead and bite into your little tube there of honey. All right, so just go ahead and open it up. Probably a little snuck in. But then just hold it away from your mouth here for a moment. Once you get the thing open, it might take. Are there instructions with that thing? You just
now,
bite it to
finally.
opposite. Okay.
Finally.
Bite up and down.
Yeah, you bite opposite. Yeah, you got it?
Got it.
Okay, so first of all, just see what you notice. Notice where attention is being drawn. Notice any of the Shaktis that are moving, thoughts, commentary, sensation, feeling. Just notice, honor. And then when you're ready, allow a little of the honey to just fall onto your tongue. And simply here, experiencing the tongue becoming sweetness. So the dharana here, one experiences the expanding joy of savoring the pleasure of eating and drinking, one should sink into the perfect condition of this joy. Then there will be exquisite delight. From the Vijnana Bhedava Tantra.
So the poet said, unity only becomes strengthened by the expansion of diversity. And we need to point out that this is regardless of the valence. So whether it's something pleasant or unpleasant, the nature of manifestation is that there's always this polarity. If anything comes into being, then its polarity comes into being with it. So this includes all experiences, regardless of the pleasant or unpleasant or neutral nature.
And Abhinavagupta described this really beautifully when he articulated the 9 rasas, or the 9 qualities of experience that are necessary for any good drama, right? Back to Joel's days in the world of drama. That for a drama to be really powerful and complete, it has to have all of these qualities. And the qualities are love, comedy, anger, grief, disgust, horror, valor, amazement, tranquility. The 9 rasas. And it's not just necessary for a really great show, but it's necessary for a complete life. All the rasas. All the rasas. So that ability to be with all the vibrations, not just in the positive valence, in all the expressions.
So the invitation becomes more and more over time to release from the story of I that each of us carries around, our resistance to the way that life is spontaneously, organically unfolding, and to begin to discover that our own unique expression, our own what we could call personhood, the process that has become a person, that this is also a beautiful blossom that is emerging in this creation. So honoring our own expression as another unique, amazing expression, but not holding on to it tightly because it is constantly evolving and moving. A sage stated, "You are no more important than a grain of sand, yet without you, the cosmos doesn't even exist." So there's this mysterious, very intimate, there's nothing more intimate than this. This is completely intimate and yet mysterious all the time. And the relationship is to an infinite power that's unknowable. You know, that's the mystery, is that we can't know. The attempt to know this infinity that is embodying as us and embodying as everything is beyond what the mind can grasp. So then we just surrender into this flow of yes, I'm here and I'm going along.
I got nothing. So this dance is happening all the time, right? It's this unyielding, unfolding of divine consciousness, right? But we just don't recognize it, right? It's veiled from us. So that whole invitation is to explore, what is it that wakes us up to this? What is that process of recognizing what's actually here and then being able to live as this, from this recognition? Okay. So I want to tell a little story. Some of you in the room have heard this story, but it really shares, for me, a powerful expression of what the lineage of teachers in the Kashmir Shaivite understanding, how this information gets transmitted, okay? So when I was in grad school, Jim was in grad school 26 years ago, I guess now, we met, and he took full liberty to grab me after our first long lunch encounter, 4 hours of conversation. And this was on the street in Chapel Hill, and he grabs me and he kisses me. And I'm like, all right, okay. Just out of another relationship. And I was like, okay, I don't know who this guy is. But just kidding. So lovely kiss. But in that kiss, I had this experience of this huge ball of white light that shot down my spine. And it was not anything I'd ever experienced before. This was not my first kiss. And this was a completely different order. Okay. So something was transmitted in that kiss. And, you know, and I've always had a little bit of a mystical leaning, so it didn't scare me. I was curious about what that was. Interesting, a couple nights later in the dream space, I have this numinous dream, and it's kind of has the quality of like a grainy old school film strip, you know, where it's not really clear, distinct lines. And so I have this vision in the dream space, and I'm sitting on the lap of this Indian guy. Never seen him, had no context for his face or anything like this. We're in a city park, sitting on his lap on this bench, I guess, or picnic table. And he says, "Don't worry, I'll hold your hand until you turn to light." I'm like, "Well, thank you, sir." Like, I have no context, no idea. So so the next morning I wake up and I'm telling Jimbo about when I talked to him about this dream, and he brings me this picture of his teacher of Muktananda. And I'm like, "That's the guy." And I'd never seen his face. I knew nothing about him, but he completely, so this lineage transpired through the dream space. Now, a few nights later, there was another dream that happens. And this was more, again, in the liminal space, not in deep sleep dreaming, but I'm seeing this yogi, and he's nothing but bones, literally just skeleton, sitting in meditation in a dark, like pitch black cave, right? And I'm hearing the word, which I'd never heard before, Navritti, 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 Navritti. So I'm hearing this over and over and over again. Like, I got nothing, right? So I tell Jimbo, like, I had this dream, and here's this yogi sitting in a cave, and he's all bones, and I'm hearing this word, Navritti, Navritti, Navritti. So turns out that this experience of Navritti, so Navrittinath was Yaneshwar's brother.
The poet
saint we just quoted. Navrittinath was Yaneshwar's brother and was Yaneshwar's guru. Yeah. And Yaneshwar had received his initiation also in a dream from his guru, which was, make sure I say this right, to honor the names, Guru Gahininath, in another dream. And Guru Gahininath was part of a group of 9 high tantric masters. I got nothing. Like, I'm a Southern girl at Chapel Hill, like, I know none of this. And I share this because it's this really amazing understanding that these lineages of clarity and wakefulness have coherence, and they have intentionality. And it is not some random discovery. That in these processes, in this particular tantric lineage, Kashmir Shaivism, there is a certain process that unfolds that has a specific signature of wisdom and understanding. Does that make sense to you guys as you hear that? Remember, we're back in the land of mystery, so if it's blowing the mind a little bit, please
slide, please.
Do well.
Yeah, so this is Nivrittinath, and he took what's called Sanjivan Samadhi. So he placed himself in a cave and intentionally let his life come to an end, what's called dropping the body. He knew it was his time. So when Kimberly saw this image of a skeleton seated in the lotus posture in a cave, this was a representation of the way he ended his life that she knew nothing about. So there's a process that Kimberly's describing, both for herself and Nivrittinath receiving his initiation from his teacher in a dream. There's a specific name in this tradition for this, which is called Shaktipat, which means the descent of Shakti, or the descent of grace is often the word that is used. And this is described in great detail in the Kashmir Shaivite tradition, this type of transmission. In fact, there's 27 levels of Shaktipat that are described in the Kashmiri Shaivite tradition, but this is not in any way unique to Kashmir Shaivism. So Jesus receiving his initiation from John the Baptist, it's described as a light descending into Jesus. The Quakers, why are they called the Quakers? Because they would have an awakening energy and their bodies would quake. The same with the Holy Rollers. we see, infinite numbers, examples of an awakening process, and it shows up in many, many different ways. Shaktipat in the Kashmir Shaivite tradition is described as usually having two main phases or events. The first is some process that places us on an intentional spiritual path. When we get to some point in our life when we realize what I really want to know is what's the nature of reality, or what is really true, or what does the word God mean, or anything like that, where we realize, okay, there's a mystery here and I want to know about it. And that's what I'm about, is I'm going to do that. That's the first phase of Shaktipat. And then usually along the way, there is some other event that makes this more dramatically clear to us that we are on this path. So there's usually at least two events in our lives, if we're on a spiritual path, that would be related to what we call Shaktipat. There are a lot of, next slide. So you're probably all familiar with the way that Kundalini, Shaktipat is actually the awakening of the Kundalini energy, the energy that is described as dormant within us until this awakening process begins, until that initial awakening process begins, a potential energy that we all have. And as it begins to awaken, as it moves through us, then there literally is, a lighting up of the energy centers along what's called the subtle body, that corresponds to the physical body, but is the body of energy or of light within the physical body. And this is all the descriptions that we have in culture. There's lots of descriptions of Kundalini and chakras and all of this. All of these derive from the tantric tradition. If you go back to where did this enter into culture, it started from the tantric traditions that we're describing. Although there are a lot of, different events that happen as the Kundalini unfolds, as this energy unfolds, this is not, when we use the word Kundalini, we're describing the same power that we've been describing all along, of this dynamic, powerful, vibrating energy. As it moves in us and wakes up, then a lot of changes can happen. Sometimes the movement of our breath will change. These are called kriyas. Kriya simply means movement. These are spontaneous movements of this energy as it moves through us. So our breathing pace can change. Sometimes it'll seem that our breathing will stop altogether for a little while. So if we can be safe with that, nothing bad will happen. There are physical movements that can happen. There are what are called mudras, or our hands or our limbs may assume a certain sort of shape or form temporarily. A variety of changes. A lot of visions happen. So this portrayal of these energy centers, often people will have visions of these energy centers and many other types of visions. The dreams that Kimberly had, that she already described. So this can manifest in essentially infinite forms. Ultimately, what comes about through this awakening process is that our identity changes. That's the fundamental change that ultimately we come to. Our identity changes from being identified as a single individual person to being identified as being this conscious awake energy. That's how we realize I am one with an expression of this divine awakening energy.
So let's see if we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So from the Shiva Sutras, Guru Rupayaha, the guru is the means. Guru is the means. Now, in our day and time, guru gets tagged to all kinds of things. There are technical gurus, and there are mechanical gurus, and there are influencer gurus, and there's all kinds of gurus. In the Kashmir Shaivite tradition, basically what this is understood to articulate is that having the grace of this awake energy is necessary for the full awakening, for the recognition, right? So it has to come from an awake dynamic or a current of energy. So the Guru va Paramashwari Anugrahika Shaktihi. So the grace bestowing power of the Supreme Goddess is the guru. The grace bestowing power of this high frequency of emanating, manifesting energy, right, is the guru. But that's the great teacher. That's the great dispeller of darkness. That's what guru means, dispeller of darkness, or a great teacher. And this guru that's necessary for this understanding to emerge in Kashmir Shaivite cosmology, right, can show up as a human. It can show up as a dream. It can show up as a being in the dream. It might be a tree, right? It doesn't, actually, she doesn't care. It can show up as any particular emanation, right? Okay, but the guru is necessary. And so this lineage of teachers becomes really, really essential, right? It's, what is his name that talked about the wake, the great wake of the boat? Alan Watts.
Alan Watts.
Alan
yeah.
Watts uses this example of the great beings that have awoken to this reality, right? They create this wake. They create this behind the great ship, this openness to understanding, to seeing clearly. And the more clear that recognition is by that being, the wake doesn't close. The wake doesn't close. So this is why, for example, we have had great beings that still today influence the entire culture of our species, right? So we go to the next slide.
What an interesting relationship between two words, wake and awake.
Isn't it?
Beautiful.
I know, Alan Watts is like
Yeah.
brilliant.
So for this, about every 5 seconds, press forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got, it's a little bit of a dance here, okay? Because we like to play. All right, so this first one, this is not the first one, but this emanation, right, of the guru is one that we all probably recognize if you'll hit the play. So Gautama, the Buddha. Can you see it? And then the next one. Yeshua, or Jesus, great master of wakefulness. Okay, and the next one. Rumi,
Mm.
great master of wakefulness. Baal Shem Tov in the Kabbalistic tradition.
Who was that again?
Baal Shem Tov. We can speak about him at the end if you'd like.
And Anandamaya Ma, another great awake being, Siddha, we call them. The next one. This is just a sampling. Ramana Maharshi. Okay. And then the last one for this little sampling. One more. Here he comes. And Bhagawan Nityananda, who was the guru of Muktananda, and incredibly exquisite being. So in Naked Through the Gate, here we go. I wish we could see Joel's face. In Naked Through the Gate, Joel describes powerful teachings that he received from the Greek goddess Athena. So this emanation of the guru in Joel's experience in that phase was Athena. Okay. And this was just before he set out on his fateful journey, right, of that final enlightenment experience. And so this is from the book, so please forgive me. I wish I had his voice. I see it, sweetheart. My attitude toward the trip as a whole was perhaps best summarized in a poem that came to me from Athena before I left. Waste no time chasing new lovers. Who can compare with my daughter, mirror of your heart? And seek no guru on your travels. Is there any more severe than me? Yeah, so the guru.
And it's a privilege and relatively rare to find an embodied guru that is in a living body and that whose field is vibrating with this awakened energy. What the word that's used in this tradition is Chaitanya, fully awake, alive and conscious. And Joel, again, we'll let Joel speak for himself, but we're just taking from his book. He describes. So he describes his first meeting with Dr. Wolf as having happened before he had his enlightened experience, when he was setting off on this journey. This is the way he described. As he's driving up towards Lone Pine to meet Dr. Wolf the first time, the road dips, then everything turns miraculous. A cloud of dust and mist blows up from the foothills, obscuring the base of the mountain so that the peaks now seem to be suspended in the finest azure. I look again and the cloud is glowing with blue light and rainbow tints, but still the mountain peaks shine through with a light of their own, as clear as I've ever seen. I feel I am approaching some holy place, holy Lone Pine. And now, too, I feel Dr. Wolf's presence, as though he were summoning me, and press on into town, where every tree, every store, every person looks to my desert-dazzled eyes sacred. Now, I think that speaks for itself.
I could have said it better myself.
So in our tradition, we would say Shaktipat was happening. And all he had to get was even close, just close into the town. And the field of energy emanating from Dr. Wolf was already generating a change. This was very much the way that I felt after my Shaktipat experience took place with Muktananda. This was in 1975. I was on a weekend retreat with him. I just met him the previous month. And there was, people were waking up, and I was certain that that's why I was there. So during a break in the meditation periods, when there was an opportunity to approach him and ask questions, I did so. And my question was, I see that people are having this kind of Shaktipat happening, and yet it hasn't happened for me. That's why I'm here. Can you do this for me? And his reply was, "You're so full of your warning that there's no room for anything else to happen." And I jumped to my feet, I surprised myself, and I said, no, you have to give it to me. Please give it to me. And he shouted, sit down right now. And a couple of moments later, he came behind me. He placed a toe at the base of my spine, a hand on top of my head, and then he breathed into my nostrils and repeated a mantra, and an explosion of energy took place throughout my body. My body locked into lotus posture. The next 10 or 15 minutes, my body began to go through spontaneous yoga postures, scared the shit out of me, literally. I mean, I felt like I had completely lost control. My breathing shifted into this powerful movement. I was scared that I was going to die, and I was really scared, and I had no idea what was happening. And a certain moment came in which I just felt like, okay, well, I'm going to give up trying to control this. And at that moment, there was a very powerful shift that took place. The energy became much more gentle, and my breath began to flow in a different way. And then it felt like honey was being poured into my brain. And I sank into by far the most profound, deep meditation I had ever experienced, spontaneously, effortlessly. And when I emerged from that meditation, for the next 24 hours, this description that Joel, everything I saw, every person I saw, I felt like I was in love with everything for the next 24 hours. And although that began to fade, the awakening that took place never faded. It just gone through, so many different waves, but there was never a point where that process stopped after that point.
So there's so much to absorb from the enlightened teachers. The teacher is necessary. The teacher is necessary. To be in the presence of a teacher that has recognized truth is necessary. But it's not just their overt teachings. Those help, right? Like Ramana Maharshi said, my teaching is silence. And if you don't understand that, I'll give you some words. So it's the overt teachings can be really helpful, that our mind needs something to hook onto. But it's the Shakti that's vibrating in that channel of clarity. That's the great gift of the Guru. That's the great gift. So in Kashmir Shaivism, it's understood that that's essential for this process. And it's a generational transmission, if you believe in generations. It's a transmission. It's a current of wakefulness. So just like in Jojin, there's the emphasis on Guru Yoga, right? On spending time with and being in the service to teachers of this clarity. And this really helps in the release of the grip of the ego, right? Because it's in that vibratory experience, that recognition. You're like, whoa, this is much bigger, right? Than anything I could ever imagine. So the power of the teacher. So once the awakening happens, though, there's no need to stay. There's no need to stay. So non-dual devotion orients us to the feeling of this presence. It's the feeling of the presence that we share everywhere all the time. So that's the devotion. And certainly because the human heart loves this creation, we'll continue to love the specific emanations, the specific beings, right? The beloveds, that which we're devoted to. Okay? But it's not necessary because the presence, the alive presence, is not dependent. Not dependent. Does that make sense to you? So it's not somewhere weird, different, far off. It's actually right here. And so this is the great confusion, that it's somewhere else. It's actually always right here. And as we begin to recognize, right, the great gift of recognizing what is here, then we begin to deepen and open to what our own unique relationship will be, is to the unfolding divinity of what this is, of consciousness, of God, goddess. And so we get these little hints, right? We get these little twinkles of what the next step in the path is, what it is we're here to discover, how it is that we're going to explore the journey within God. Like they have that wonderful little saying, the journey to God is finite and the journey within God is infinite. Our journeys within God are unique and specific to what our, who knows how, I don't even know why it happens the way it does, but I'd like to share a story of this process of how the innate intelligent wisdom of Shiva-Shakti transmits to us, through us, in multidimensional ways. This is completely transrational, so we're back in the land of mystery. Unbuckle your seatbelts, they are not necessary. So just going to share a little story. I love this story because for me, it's one of these processes that has just continued to ever deepen, not just my certainty, but my faith in the infinite power of what is here and unfolding each of us. And so I was in, some of you know, we have this place in Kauai that we like to visit. A friend of ours lives there, and he's got this temple, really beautiful temple to Bhagwan Nityananda, this guru of ours that is such a blessing. And I love to sit in this temple. It is in fact my favorite thing to do on the planet, is to meditate in this temple. So I was there, I had gone for a solo retreat a couple years back, and I was sitting in the temple just meditating, and out of nowhere, I have this experience of this golden temple emerging out of my heart, which of course is an exquisite teaching in and of itself, right? Like you don't really need anything else than that. But it's not it was not an image that I'd ever seen. I had no context for it, but it was this very clear image. And my teachers over the years have said, you know, when this comes through, you just thank it. What do you want me to know? what do you want me to know? Because I got nothing. Right. So this temple, golden temple, comes through. So I come back to Portland. We get through the fall. We're having kirtan or devotional chanting at our house, which we do once a month. Super fun. If you're ever in Portland, please let us know. We'd love you to come. And there's this chant that I really love. And I love it for a couple of reasons. One of them is because it's the chant that the swamis, or the monks in the order that Jimbo was in India, it's the song they sing as they're taking their vows and they start to walk off to the Himalayas, right, in pursuit of truth, but they're called back to service. So I've always just loved that vision. It's like the Bodhisattva, right? It's very similar to that. So I've always loved this chant, and I love the way it feels in my mouth, and I love the vibration of it. And I really wanted to sing it at this kirtan. And the musicians were like, no, it's too complicated. We won't be able to do it. The Sanskrit's difficult. I was like, I don't care, we're doing it. Jimbo's like, no, it's too complicated. I was getting pushy. I'm like, no, we're doing it. And so we end up singing this chant. So we're singing this chant, which we'd never introduced to the group before, and it is complicated, but we're singing it anyway. And so I'm sitting there, I have this experience, which I'd never had before, land of mystery, please unbuckle your seatbelts. And I had this experience of actually shape-shifting into the deity of Shiva. Blue skin, snakes, the Ganga river flowing out of my mouth and out of my top knot. And I'm like, all right, I guess Shiva's in the house, and so we finished the chant. And so Jimbo stands up at the end of the chant and he's like, well, I just had the most incredible and unrefutable insistence from Shiva to stand up and talk about Shiva as incarnate deities. It was a very kind of shamanic deity in the tradition. So Jimbo stands up, talks about Shiva, and I'm like, and in his meditation, he's like, we don't do that. We don't really talk about Shiva in that way. And he was being insisted, no, stand up and talk about Shiva. So he does that. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll need to share this. I'd had this experience of shape-shifting into Shiva, which had never happened before. And it turns out that this particular chant that we're singing, which I did not know what it was singing to, except I knew it was a Shiva chant, but it was singing to Kashi Vishwanath Temple, which is this really important temple in Kashi. Kashi, of course, is where the Buddha chose to give his first sermon.
Now called Varanasi.
Varanasi, okay. So I knew nothing about Kashi, I knew nothing about Varanasi, but that's what this chant was singing to. And one of our friends, who I didn't know, he'd only come to chanting once before. He had just come back from India and he'd been living right beside that temple for a month, the one that we were just singing to, right? So I'm like, all right, fantastic. There's something that's wanting to be known here, right? So can you feel like you can see that there are these pointers happening? So then I'm like, so what is this Vishwanath temple? So I get onto Dr. Google. I'm like, tell me something more about Vishwanath temple. And it is exactly the golden temple that arose out of my heart 4 months prior in meditation. Okay. So I'm like, all right, thank you, whatever you want me to know. So one of my
Sufficiently blown.
mine was sufficiently blown. Yeah.
Right, it's sufficiently blown.
Right. But it gets better. So then one of my beloved teachers, Lee, he says to me, whenever you get these downloads, then you just ask, what do you want me to know? Why are you showing me this? What do you want me to know? So in meditation, I'm like, all right, what do you want me to know? You're shape-shifting, you're showing me Kashi Vishwanath Temple. And as soon as I asked the question, this immense pillar of white light from high above wherever to well below everywhere else, like shoots through the center of my spine. And I hear established pillars of light around the world. I'm like, great, who does that? Right? So turns out that not only was Kashi that exact golden temple that I had seen, that our friend had been in Kashi beside that temple, but this temple is considered where Buddha gave his first sermon. It's considered the first place where Shiva dropped his pillar of light on the planet. None of which I knew. I was completely uninformed about any of this. So I share this story, one, because it's a fun mind blow story, but two, because there is an incredibly coherent intelligence that is unfolding through these realms. Incredibly coherent, right? So this lineage, this Kashmir Shaivite lineage, through these awake teachers, are transmitting a certain view on reality that has a coherence, right? That again is well beyond what the rational mind might be able to conjure.
And we would suggest, so the Athena coming to Joel is a particular expression of the supreme mysterious reality, as that took the form of Athena for him over and over again, instructing him. In the same way, what we would call Shiva-Shakti also can assume forms. That those forms are expressions of that infinite energy, but also they come to us because there's a correspondence to who we are as a unique expression. So because we don't want you to confuse Shiva with that particular form. Shiva is the name for that underlying infinite reality, but it does assumes all forms, including our own forms. So forms in this path are not seen as something to skew. A form is a communication, and sometimes a unique communication that guides us in what we need at that moment of our path. Does this make sense at all to you?
Something that will be personal to you.
Yeah, it's very meaningful. And when it happens across people, like she just described, where it's showing up in multiple unpredictable, non-solicited ways, then you know that you better pay attention.
Pay attention.
There's something here that you're being told and taught that you need to pay attention to. Next slide.
Oh,
Yeah, we're gonna have some questions at the
It's
end.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
If somebody's going like this, when you
Okay.
well, it's also a confirmation of who you are.
Sure. Who we are fundamentally,
You are fundamentally.
as well as the
Besides being a
unique.
teacher up.
Yeah,
it's
also the
who
unique
you
expression
are,
that
yeah.
there's an alignment, that you as an expression are in alignment with what. Are you familiar with the concept of Dharma, as that each of us has a unique expression in life, and that's changing all the time. It's not like your Dharma is one thing, and every moment there's a Dharma that each of us are expressing, and that's amazing, Yeah, so we are in alignment with our Dharma. Yes, beautiful. So one of the primary ways that in this tradition the awakening happens, and this is actually also there's a lot of parallels between Kashmir Shaivism and Dzogchen. So in Dzogchen, there's a description of the secret of mantra, and the same words are used in this tradition. There's the secret of mantra is that mantra. Well, here's the sutra. Chitta mantraha. The mind is mantra. Our mind is a vibratory expression of energy, and a mantra is a vibration that can carry this transmission. So when we engage with a mantra, it's not simply syllables. It is a highly charged instrument, a spiritual technology to have this kind of awakening continue to happen, if you will.
Now, this invitation to explore the possibility that mind is mantra is really interesting when we consider the mantras that we're usually practicing. Something's wrong with that person, something's wrong with me, something's wrong with the world, I really hate this, right? Blah, 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 right? What is the mantra that we're usually practicing? And how much coherence does it have? And is it skillful and supportive? And does it keep us aligned? Right. So we can see, if we just pause for a moment, that there's all kinds of ways that the mind is mantra is true, and how directly that impacts our experience, right? I mean, doesn't it? Doesn't it impact the quality of our experience and our receptivity to what is here? So the spiritual technology of mantra is not only, as Jimbo was describing, this possibility of accessing these really concentrated packets of awake intelligence through the sound vibration, but it's also helping in the structuring of the psyche. So if we are practicing the mantra, I honor the underlying reality of what this is. If that's what our minds are structuring as, it is really different than, wow, this guy's a jerk. Right? You see what I mean? Totally different vibration, true? The totally different vibration.
So we'd like to invite you to engage in just a short while in both vocally singing this mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, which literally means I honor the grounded being. Remember, the word Shiva literally means underlying, that which underlies all. So Namah, it means literally to bow, but in a more essential way, it means to honor. And Om, I think you're all familiar with. Om represents this infinite reality. So we're going to be singing this together for a little while and then meditating quietly. And there'll be instructions to go along with that. But we want to say a little bit more about our own experiences of the mantra. The power of the mantra became most apparent to me. I was the year after I met Muktananda, then we went to India for the first time for me. And on a night that's called the Mahashivaratri, the Great Night of Shiva, we were singing this mantra together all night long. And I was seated there close to Muktananda. And as the chanting went on, to my total amazement, my mind, and here we talk of, by mind we mean everything that is the apparatus of perceiving, whether it be perceiving thoughts or feelings or sensations or the environment around us. So with mind, we're talking about the expression of consciousness that is essentially our experience of the moment. Mind merged into the actual syllables. Literally, my mind became the syllables. I can't describe it otherwise. And as mind merged into the syllables, then I don't have any words to describe, but there was an infinity of space and energy and pure consciousness that without any form. And then at some point in that timeless infinite, then the mantra emerged again, and then my mind emerged from the mantra. So for me, that mind of mantra was like literal. I mean, from that point on, I realized, okay, the mantra is conscious. It's a transmission of consciousness itself. I'll pass the buck to you.
All right. So that's one expression of the power of the mantra. Another one I'd like to share briefly is I was, again, in that same temple. I was with a friend of mine and just doing my regular old meditation. And so I had this experience of a kriya. What kriya is just a spontaneous movement of energy. So you've probably experienced it. And in this particular kriya, my head drops all the way back so that the back of my skull was literally touching my spine, which is not something I can do volitionally, but the movement of the energy was so strong that my head drops back. And I had just asked the question, what does best service look like? That's my lifelong sort of question. Like, what does best service look like? How do I best serve? How do I best serve? So in that moment, head drops back and I have this perception of this massive snake emerging. We're in the land of mystery, unbuckle, have this massive snake emerge from the base of my throat, and the tongue like whips across the temple, which is about maybe half the size of this space, a quarter. And in that exact moment, the mantra comes on the speaker.
Om Namah
Om
Shivaya.
Namah Shivaya. It's completely in sync. After we finish the meditation, my friend and I walk outside, and she's like, I had the strangest experience in meditation. I looked over at you and you had completely turned into this serpent. So, and the reason I like to share that story is that it could appear as though it is simply something that the mind is creating up in its infinite play of, right? But it's this recognition when there is perception from multiple views, that there are multidimensional expressions of intelligence that are here inviting our exploration.
So we will be singing Om Namah Shivaya together. The meaning, orient to this meaning. I honor the grounded being. Your own being, the being of us all, of everything. So that's however that you can connect with that. That's the meaning of it. But more important than the meaning is the vibration. This is the vibration that we're going to engage with, and just see what happens, like an experiment.
We'll do this call and response. So I'll sing the line, and then you can respond. Jim, will you lead the response? Okay, it's super simple.
And then there'll be some instructions when we go quiet. Stay with the feeling. Orient to feeling.
Deep underlying continuity of alive, aware presence. Fully intimate. The throb of creation. Not two, one. At Tvamasi. that thou art.
Namaste.
It's not done. This bowl is incredible. Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you so much for not only being present, but being willing to experiment with the singing of the mantra, sitting with its vibration. So I know that we need to end around 1, so
2 minutes.
yeah, any final comments before we draw our gathering to a close?
I'll make one comment. I really appreciate the chanting. I'm not a chanter, but this is one of my favorite quotes is from Lali Shwari, who you must be familiar with. She's a poet from Kashmir in the Kashmir Shaivism tradition. And I don't remember it exactly, but the essence of it is she's talking to herself and she says, "Oh, Lali, listen, because the water is flowing, it's saying Om Namah Shivaya. The wind's blowing, it's saying Om Namah Shivaya. All the universe is saying Om Namah Shivaya." And it ends with, "Oh, Lali, pay a little attention." That's such a beautiful teaching because, you know, you could be anywhere if you remember that little poem. It's true. It's absolutely true.
Mm.
Pay a little attention.
Mm. Well, with that, I think that's the perfect ending.
That is the perfect ending. Oh gosh.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.